We begin the day in the final stretch of campaigning ahead of an election unlike any Canadians have ever seen. Prime Minister Mark Carney has a healthy lead in the polls over his closest rival, the Conservative Pierre Poilievre. Now, Carney's lead and possible victory were unlikely, to say the least, when he took over from Justin Trudeau last month. Support for the Liberal Party was at rock bottom. It was U.S. President Donald Trump who, almost overnight, changed the minds and politics of many Canadians. His trade tariffs on Canadian imports and his provocative call for Canada to become the 51st U.S. state became a nationwide trigger, boosting the standing of the Liberal Party. Prime Minister Carney's firm stance against American pressure came at just the right time. Trump's policies catalyzed Canada's politics and reminded Canadians that their future and their fortune remain tied, like it or not, to what happens south of the border.
A dinner where Canada was on the menu. At his Mar-a-Lago resort last November, Donald Trump proposed the US should swallow its northern neighbour. The Canadians there thought he was joking, but the punchline soon became policy with a plan to achieve it.
Economic force, because Canada and the United States, that would really be something.
He claimed Canadians would be better off as Americans, though perhaps not its Prime Minister, who he preemptively downgraded.
I spoke to Governor Trudeau on numerous occasions, and we'll see what happens. But it just sets up so good for them. Look, the people would pay much less tax than they're paying right now. They'd have perfect military protection. So I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
So what does Trump want from Canada in return? An open door for Wall Street for a start.
They don't allow our banks. Did you know that? Canada does not allow banks to go in.
Although 16 US banks do already operate there, most don't meet the requirements to run retail branches, something Trump wants to change.
And Canada's been tough on the military because they have a very low military cost.
Trump thinks he should be Canada's commander-in-chief. He berates Canada for failing to meet its NATO military spending pledge of 2% of GDP. Canada's large Arctic frontier offers appealing real estate where the US could set up camp. There's a wealth of water up north, and Trump wants more of it to flow to his thirsty southern states, calling Canada's rivers a faucet to be opened. And if he can't conquer Canada, Trump thinks the frontier should shift. He said that treaties which govern their border and control of the Great Lakes were invalid and could be abandoned.
The Americans want our resources, our water, our land, our country.
Trump's takeover threats have boosted Canada's recently appointed Prime Minister Mark Carney. His Liberal Party goes into snap elections with a lead as Canadians seek stability and rally around their flag. They're voting to put Canada first instead of 51st.
Well, I'm joined now by Jason Langrish. Jason set up and runs the top-level Canadian business conference, the Energy Roundtable. That means he has the ear of the leaders of Canada's energy industry. Jason, it's good to have you with us on this Friday evening. If you could give us an idea of the role that the energy sector plays in the Canadian economy and who the leaders of that industry would prefer to lead your next government.
Well, that's a great question. Well, first off, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks. Thanks very much. So the energy sector is a very important sector of the Canadian economy. It's actually only second to the housing sector in terms of its contribution to the GDP. It's over 10% of Canada's economy. And in terms of who they would like to have lead the country, that's a bit of a loaded question. So Canada, being a very big country, has a variety of different types of energy, everything ranging from lithium extraction to nuclear energy to oil and gas. If you're talking about the more traditional oil and gas sectors, that would be the Conservative Party of Canada. However, if you're talking about electrification, especially zero emissions electrification, you're probably looking at the support moving towards the Liberal and left of center parties.
Okay. The U.S. President Donald Trump, he has complained a lot about the trade surplus with your country. Does that make sense to you?
No, and it doesn't make sense for a few reasons. First off, surpluses and deficits are not a leading indicator of the health of the trading relationship between two countries. I'm not going to go into the reasons for that, but that is a well-established fact. When you come to Canada and the United States, we have a deficit with the United States, or a surplus as an exporting country, of roughly $100 billion a year. That's for goods, not services. So bear in mind, 80% of our economic activity in advanced countries is services. So we're talking about goods. So that's where our surplus is, $100 billion. We export about $125 billion worth of crude oil to the United States. Now, because the United States is our only buyer, we also have to sell it at a discount. The United States imports that oil, they refine it, they add value to it, and then they sell it on and pocket the difference. So from my perspective, it's a very healthy relationship, notably for the United States.
And Canada and the U.S., they've had a very long and close relationship, and that means friends have trade surpluses, trade deficits, and it's usually not a problem because there is a high level of trust between the two parties. What does it mean, though, when that trust is suddenly diminished or gone?
Well, it's very concerning. I mean, as you say, I don't have the exact figures, but I believe for something like 30 of the 50 U.S. states, maybe even more, Canada is the largest trading partner. And Canada is also the largest trading partner with the United States. We have a very long established relationship, including going back to the free trade agreement in the late 80s, the NAFTA, and then the renegotiation of the NAFTA agreement to the CUSMA, Canada, U.S., Mexico agreement in the first Trump presidency. And now we're presented with a scenario whereby not only is the president not honoring the very agreement that he signed, he's now embarking on all kinds of trade actions, which in our view don't really make sense. And of course, it's not just Canada that's being targeted by this, it's the world. So it's very concerning. And I think you hit on a key point, which is, these things do come and go in terms of economic cycles, but trust is, when it's been broken, it's a hard thing to get back.
And if Mark Carney wins, is he the man with the skills to deal with Donald Trump? Can't he force a rebuilding of that trust?
Well, Mark Carney is a very unique circumstance. 3 months ago, he was not even in the political realm. He was a casual advisor to the then Prime Minister Trudeau. And now he's on the cusp of becoming the Prime Minister of Canada. So we will find out. However, he does have a very strong track record. He's clearly very well connected in international circles, especially through his work with, as governor of the Bank of England and other things of that nature. He knows a lot of people in the business community. So I do think he would be well qualified to deal with President Trump and these types of issues. However, the issue of these trade actions and these economic actions that are being taken by the president and his administration will, at the end of the day, be resolved domestically. The pressures that will come to bear on the White House as a result of the impacts in various states, various sectors, and various industries are going to have far more of an impact on the president's decision making than anything that a future Canadian Prime Minister can have.
I want to look beyond the United States for a moment. You also played a direct role in negotiations of the European Union-Canada Free Trade Agreement as a representative of the private sector. Is Europe, in your opinion, still a meaningful hedge for Canada against U.S. instability, U.S. unpredictability?
That's a fascinating question. And the short answer is yes, to a degree. I mean, we have to manage expectations. When over 75% of our goods trade goes to the United States, we're not just going to shift that over to Europe, especially when one is crossing a border, a land border, and the other is involving putting on a boat and, sailing for quite some time to get it into the European market. That said, the whole reason that we wanted a free trade agreement with the European Union in the first place was we wanted a measure of diversification. We felt we had an over-reliance on the U.S. market and that it would be healthy for us to have other relationships fully developed. So, yes, I think we have this free trade agreement in place. We have a very strong trade and investment relationship between Canada and the European Union. However, the limitation going forward is not so much going to be the actual formal agreement or anything of that nature. It's that if we really want to realize the full potential of this relationship, we have to build more export infrastructure. That means expanding ports, the ability to ship resources, which may require LNG facilities, things of that nature. That's really what we need to do to take it to the next level. And that just doesn't happen overnight. Those are, a minimum of 10 years to build
and just
projects.
Let me ask you before we run out of time, there's been a lot of talk about the possibility of Canada joining the European Union. Which camp are you in there, right? Yes or no?
Well, I think it's a non-starter. To join the European Union, to become a member state, you have to sign up to something called the acquis communautaire. Essentially, It's the community rules. And that means you have to meet all the guidelines that govern the single market of the European Union. Well, Canada's economy has been structured within the framework of the North American market, the North American free trade area. And in some cases, there's quite a divergence between the rules that are applied in North America and the rules that are applied in Europe. For instance, for automotives, for regulatory approvals, all kinds of things. So I think the idea that we would ditch, because let's make no mistake, in some cases we would have to ditch what we've built in North America and then sign on to what Europe has built, is not really feasible.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that President Trump would say, don't do that, just become the 51st state and everything will work out. Jason Langrish, it's been good talking with you. We appreciate you sharing your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.